We will this morning begin our meeting. Brother Jason is going to bring us a report as well as a study about evangelism, I expect. A report on the work of the Christian Chronicle, and then will be
Courier.
Courier? Yes, major difference there. The Christian Courier. You got to be careful which one of those you get too. There's a Canada version of that thing. It's radically different. So be careful online. Christian Courier. We look forward to that, and then to hearing his message to us in the worship hour. So, Brother Jason, come here.
It's good to see everybody this morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you and to look forward to a number of days together today and through Wednesday in this gospel meeting. When Brother Paul contacted me about this opportunity, he mentioned about talking about the Christian Courier in our Bible class hour. So I'm delighted to do that and happy to give you a report on some things that we've been trying to do, some things that we would like to continue to do in the future, as well as just providing a little bit of background information to those of you who maybe are new to the Christian Courier and don't even know what we're talking about or why. So I hope it'll be informative for all of us. At the heart of our discussion this morning is the matter of soul winning. The Christian Courier is just really a representation of what some people are trying to do as Christian people in spreading the gospel. And so we'll be discussing what that means and what we go about doing. So let me just, in a brief way, answer this question that someone might have. Well, what is the Christian Courier? The Christian Courier is a number of things. First of all, it's just the name of a printed journal that was begun in Stockton, California by my dad and the other brethren there in 1965. And so it's a Bible study. It's like what we do on Sundays and Wednesdays. It's a Bible study, but this Bible study comes to a person's mailbox. So that's as simple as it gets. And there are a lot of people that may have access to a local congregation and Bible study and yet want to have more personal Bible study on their own. So this is the kind of resource that many people take advantage of on their own, in their own time, to engage in further study of the Scriptures. But the Christian Courier is more than just this printed journal that has been going on for about 57 years. It is also then the same kind of thing through the internet at christiancourier.com. And so as we talk about this, we're talking about essentially one thing. It's just sharing the gospel. Sometimes that's in print, sometimes that's audio, sometimes that's through the internet. But that's essentially what we're talking about. And the name Christian Courier comes from the original publication. Like an urgent message that needs to be delivered. That's the idea in this title. Now, as we think about the Lord's directive to the church regarding soul winning, regarding our purpose, we think about what he says in Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20. Go therefore and make disciples. There's the idea, right? Make disciples. Well, that begins as a person learns the gospel and they're responding to the gospel in faith and repentance, confession, and they're baptized. Go make disciples, baptizing them. But as we know, that's not where the commission ends. All of us know, both from our awareness of the Scripture's teaching and from our own experience, that that's just when it begins, right? And we continue to try to grow and develop, and we don't even know what life has in store for us. And so there is the need for continued teaching and learning. And we see that here highlighted. Baptizing them, that's where it begins. But teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I've commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. And if you think about the Christian Courier as just some people who are trying to do this through printed material, through the internet, that's simply what we're doing. Both trying to reach those who need to hear the gospel originally and be baptized, and for the church to continue to be taught and strengthened. And so we often reflect upon both parts of the Great Commission. Reaching the lost, but in addition to that, continuing to learn all that the Lord wants us to learn. Now, let's just reflect upon some things we can discern from our New Testaments about the earliest days of soul winning. So Jesus gives this commission, and the apostles began to be the first ones to carry it out. And we might ask, what was their method? We can look at Paul in the book of Acts, and we can reflect upon the things that come through in his letters. And we can get something about how Paul carried this out. How do we find people who need to hear the gospel? How do we tend to people? New churches, young churches, new Christians. How do we do this? As we think about Paul's method, we break it down in this way. A lot of times Paul went in person, and sometimes he went by letter. A lot of his groundbreaking evangelism was in person. A lot of the tending of churches and new Christians was by letter. And thus we have so much from him that forms our New Testament. As Paul traveled around, as you think about the record in the book of Acts of Paul's travels and his journey, you remember he had, when there was an opportunity, he had a method, didn't he? He went into synagogues a lot of times. And why did he do that? It was just the natural thing to do, right? He was, when he grew up, a synagogue goer. He grew up in that culture. And so he knew the system, he knew the people, he knew what their life was like as he was, having been raised in that same way. So he was a Jew, and throughout the Mediterranean world where he was working, there were synagogues in different places. That's where he went. It was just a natural fit. In other words, this is where he would find people. And the synagogue service lent itself to Bible reading and discussion. And it was just a perfect fit for him to go into communities. Now, sometimes that went well and sometimes it didn't go well, right? But that was a part of his method. And then he would find people, like in Acts 16 when he came into Philippi, he found Lydia and other ladies who were at a place by the river where they would get together and pray. So he found, think about this, he found people who were already interested in spiritual things. He found high value context, you might say. How did he? Well, he had a method. That's how he did it. He had a method. There were other times, for example, in Acts chapter 17, when he came into Athens, and it was a university town. It was a town where there was a lot of discussion as a part of a different culture, of Greek culture, but But it lent itself as well for a visitor like him to start engaging people. And he had limited success there. He found some interested people. But we see that Paul identified what we might call the landscape of his time and said, where is a good opportunity? And so we need to mention too that he was involved in the other half of the Great Commission. He didn't just go into a town and find some people and bring them to Christ and then move on and never think about them again. And so we have these letters. He wrote to groups and individuals. He wrote to congregations or even regions that had multiple congregations like Galatia, and to individuals. So that's something about Paul's method. So how do people search or look today for answers? Where do a lot of people go to ask a question, to say, why is my dishwasher leaking like it is? That's right. So this is not one physical place or city, but this is a virtual place that people gather to share information. And it's immediate, it's instant, and a lot of what we'll appreciate from our own experience is a lot of it is driven by somebody's need right now. Right? I need to fix my car, I need to fix something at the house, or I need to find where to go, or hey, what's the best restaurant in Boise, or whatever. You're traveling. What is my need? I ask a question. As you see on the bottom of the chart, Google answers over 40,000 questions every second. That's just hard to even get your mind around, right? But what this does is it is something that we're all familiar with from our own experience, but it reminds us of where people are going to get information. Now, just some of these matters to take into account. The world population is 7.9 billion people. Now, think about this, the second bullet point here. More than 68% have an internet connection, compared to less than 1% in 1995. Now, that's no surprise to any of us as we've thought about the growth of the internet, of instant access for information. But here's something I think is fascinating in the third place, and that is 6.6 billion smartphones are active, and that's doubled just in the last several years. Now, that's not cell phones. That number is even higher. This is smartphones, which means what? No longer are people required to be at home at their computer to ask these questions. So we all know how life has changed and how that technology is something that is just everywhere. And let's consider then the advantage that gives us, or at least an opportunity in terms of sharing the gospel. If you were to go to ChristianCourier.com, this would be the page that you would see, the home page. And ChristianCourier.com is basically a library of around 1,500 articles on all kinds of Bible topics and Bible passages. Now, most people that end up at ChristianCourier.com do not type in to their phone or their computer, ChristianCourier.com, go. That's not how they get there. More than 75% of traffic, and that is growing, comes from someone who asks Google a question. Now, let me just pause and rewind for a minute and go back to 1998. In 1998, when we began the Christian Courier online, we envisioned a resource where these Bible studies could be found, where people would go, and especially Christian people could go. They would hear about it and know about it, and they would type in ChristianCourier.com and make themselves available for a Bible study and read about this topic or this Bible passage or whatever it might be. That has changed. The internet has changed. And so, wherein we originally thought, well, here could be a resource for members of the church to know about and learn and go to, it has transformed into something we didn't even envision in 1998. And that is a tool for evangelism. Now, why has that transition taken place? Because of the way the internet developed. Because now, most people, every day who come to ChristianCourier.com have come asking a question in a search engine about their interest right now. And so they don't come to this page. They create a search of their own interest. Now, how powerful is that? Paul went into places where he had high-value contacts. Here are Jews who are already familiar with the Scriptures and they're interested in spiritual things. Here are some ladies by the river who are praying. They're interested in God and wanting to live right. And so we have the ability to instantly deliver spiritual content to people who are asking about their interest. And so that's a very different dynamic than we've all had friends, we've all had people we've been concerned about. We've tried to talk to them to the gospel, about the gospel, and it's like, they're not interested. We try to plant little seeds, but how very different it is when someone is knocking on our door. Say, hey, tell me more about Jesus. Tell me more about the grace of God. Explain to me this question. Can people fall away? Or one of the most frequent questions we get, I think I've fallen away and it's too late. Can I come back? That's kept a lot of people up at night. Now, let's think about how this this transaction takes place between a searcher and ChristianCourier.com. I know the Google search result page is not very easy to see. It's small print. But I'm just illustrating that when someone types in a question like, what is the true meaning of grace? This search result says that in 0.71 seconds, 1.5 million search results were generated. Now let me ask you a question, because I think we all have the same experience. Whatever you're searching for, and in 0.7 seconds, you get 159 million results. How many of those are you going to go through? Right. So if you're wanting to be found, it's not enough to say, well, we put up a website. We put up a website, maybe somebody will find it. Well, maybe that's true. But if you are not ranking extremely high in the search results, you're not going to be found. And you won't rank very high in the search results consistently, and you won't rank very high in the search results by accident. So here is an example. You type in, what is the true meaning of grace? And Christian Courier is the second in the search result. And this comes from 3 days ago. Now, in a month it may not be there. It may rank first. It may rank third. But just part of the thing that goes on behind the scenes is the ongoing efforts to rank high. So here's what's had to be a part of the technical side of our work. Here we have this growing library over time of Bible studies. But over the last 25 years or so, the dynamic has changed. So we are able to basically retool the site over time to make articles rank high when someone asks a question. So how's that done? I don't know, because that's not my job. That's what my brother does. But what he says to me, in terms of what he thinks I can understand, is, number one, articles are often retitled in the form of a question. So when the search engine is in that 0.7 seconds surveying all these websites, one thing that it's going to hit on is what is the title of the article or of the YouTube video or of whatever you may be looking for. What's the title? That's one hit. Then there are headings in our articles. Headings then give you an advantage. And then is there a social media connection somewhere? Is there any kind of other aspects to this content that has multiple touches with what Google says is valuable in searches? So it's an ongoing matter. So let me think about these 4 subpoints here under how do we get found. The ease of entry now in what you might call publication on the internet is becoming easier all the time. Well, what does that mean? It means it's a more and more crowded space. So over time, it's more difficult to rank high, not less difficult. There are more websites, as you see, than ever, and they're growing all of the time. And there's competition, right? So somebody else is vying for the position, what is the true meaning of grace? Somebody else is looking to be found as well. So there's that aspect. Then there is the matter of what we might call evolving landscape. And what we mean by that is this. What Google decided last year in terms of who gets found, right? We're at their mercy. They're the ones who are writing the programs, creating the algorithms, and all of the ways it works. We're at their mercy, and they change the rules. Sometimes sites that have Christian content are punished. Other sites are favored. So there's a lot that's going on. And then we haven't even talked about security issues, right? The threats that come through the internet to try to take your site down or whatever it might be. And so these are the kinds of things that are going on. And yet, here's what we all know. Without any kind of, IT background at all, I know if you're not on that first page, you're not going to be found. Very unlikely. So this is part of what we're experiencing. So if you were to click on this article, The True Meaning of Grace, if you had searched something like that and you saw in that first page and you started looking, this is what you would find in terms of what the article looks like. Now here's something I want to point out to you. And I know you can't necessarily read this, but do you see if you scroll down to the end of the article, you would see this box called Related Articles. Do you see that? Now I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But this is a feature in every article. So this is important because the more time you can have somebody on there, right? right? You've been there, right? Up to 2:30 in the morning, you just, started on a search, and then it's like, I can't get away from it. And I kept finding more information and more information. So this is how we keep people up at night. Related articles. And they had an interest. The reason they're there is they had a question. They find that high-ranking Bible study. They click on it. They read it. If they're at all intrigued or interested, then it's not uncommon at all for them to then click on a related article. And they see a title, and they just begin a study of their own. Again, I'm going to come back to that and tell you why that's important in evangelism. Now, these are a couple of my favorite stories that I like to share with people. And the reason is I know more about their particular stories in detail. We hear things from time to time. I have a friend who was preaching in Florida, and he met a person at church who in some way told him that he had been involved in studying the Bible and found ChristianCourier.com, and that was his first introduction to the gospel. So we've heard things from time to time, and we've not heard directly from people. It's just kind of things that we hear from time to time. But here are people that I've talked to and asked for more details. Can you explain in detail what you were going through, what it was like, what was your experience, and how this helped you? So here was a young couple by the name of Paul and Monica, living in Winslow, Arizona. And to go back in time a little bit, they were a young couple dating in high school. And they had grown up among the Jehovah's Witnesses. So as time went by, they were involved with each other, and this came out, and they confessed this. But instead of embracing them and offering them comfort and forgiveness, they were really mistreated. So this is what they're telling me. And this is a reason why they just kind of went their own way in the world. So they got married, and a few years later they started a family, and they thought to themselves, like a lot of people have, right? We're having kids, and maybe you start thinking about things in a little more serious way, and they thought about, we need to get back in church. Well, even though several years had gone by, they went back to all that they knew, and they weren't welcomed back. So they were really lost, really depressed, felt this kind of need as new parents to do something. And you know what they did? The Jehovah's Witnesses teach that 144,000 people are going to go to heaven. And you may live forever on earth in paradise, but that's the number. So Paul and Monica, for whatever reason, typed in to Google, who are the 144,000? And you're not going to be surprised for me to tell you what they found. Ranking extremely high in that Google search was an article on the ChristianCourier.com. Who are the 144,000? And they clicked on that, and they read that. They were intrigued by it. And then they saw related articles. And they read, and they read, and they're opening their Bible, and they're saying, this is what they told us. They came, several years ago, by the way, they came to Stockton, California to meet us all in person. It was really wonderful. So they explained that they're thinking about this, and they're interested, and they have their Bible open. And even though this is not what they have been taught all their lives, they're like, but this makes sense. So it's intriguing them. Now, here's the amazing thing that happened. At that very same time, the Winslow Church of Christ was holding a gospel meeting. And they put an ad in the local newspaper. And here, Paul and Monica see this. Now, to them at this point, they have not connected ChristianCourier.com with the Church of Christ. But they've had this interest. And they have been opening their Bible. And they see this, so this attracts their attention. And so they go, and they meet some people, and a Bible study is set up with them, and Paul and Monica were baptized. Now, we're not in any way, shape, or form saying that the work that is done in trying to spread the gospel is all there is. When I talk to you about Steve and Jenny, you're going to see we're only trying to help the local congregation, with the first steps. But this is what has happened. And so those people embraced this young couple, and they were just absolutely thrilled with finding the gospel and a community of people who would accept them as people just wanting to do what's right. And a little side note on that is their girls, they had two daughters, just started inviting all their friends. And so they were having to make multiple trips, taking people back and forth to church. They eventually had someone donate an old school bus, and Paul and Monica were driving a school bus full of kids to church. I mean, that's just amazing. Steve from Oregon, near Beaverton, Oregon, was not religious at all. Certainly not in any kind of formal sense. He wasn't even sure if there was a God. He certainly didn't then believe the Bible was the Word of God. And yet Steve, like a lot of people, you think about Paul and Monica, what was the life experience? Well, having children was kind of a wake-up call to say, hey, we're responsible for these kids. Steve's was a health issue. So he's a single father. His daughter at that time was a teenager, and he started having some heart issues. And one night, he was experiencing some heart problems, and it just made him think, I got to come to grips with some answers. What's real? And so he began asking Google questions. And he found ChristianCourier.com, and here is the amazing thing. He started in on those related articles. But Steve spent a year reading and thinking and coming back and reading and thinking. I mean, beginning with this type of question. Is God real? Is the Bible trustworthy? I mean, those were the fundamental issues that he had to resolve. And he found that kind of content. He found related articles. And literally after a year, he emailed and explained, I've been on your site for a year. I've been reading and I am intrigued. Can you help me find a church in my area that will teach me as I'm reading here? We said, yes, we can. And we pointed him right to the church in his area, and he was baptized, and his daughter was baptized. And that's exactly how it got started. I could tell you about CDs. On the back of the Christian Courier, there's a level of engagement if somebody wants to think about. They get a CD and a newsletter and some other materials on a monthly basis. But I tell you that to say that we have sent out tens of thousands of CDs, which are just Bible studies, audio lessons. And so, people used to put those CDs in their car. That's going away too, right? I know some of you may still have an 8-track laying around or two. That's fine. We're not judging anybody. But CDs, for a long time have been a way to deliver audio content. Well, these get passed out. People will listen to it and pass them out. One gospel preacher in Oklahoma had some people come to his office from the community for some marriage counseling. They were not members of the church, and he just happened to have his Fortify Your Faith packet handy. He had listened to the CD, and he just passed it off to him. Just thought, well, this may be interesting. And it was just enough of a curiosity. It wasn't something that gave them all the information they needed right there, but it was just like, well, that was interesting, and they came back. And these are the kinds of ways that we partner with people in different places to try to help people with the questions that they have. Now, I might just say, well, what else does this do? We've talked a little bit about something we're all interested in, and that's finding that high-value contact, right? It's so hard when people just have no interest. And we keep trying to talk to people, or maybe we even get discouraged, like, man, nobody I know just wants anything to do with it. So we're in a unique position with this one effort to have people knocking on our door with their questions. But so much else is done with the same content. So whether it's the printed edition that goes into people's homes and the books and the CDs and other resources that are made available, there are a lot of people just like you that use the material just for their own personal enrichment. So this happens all of the time. So it's helping the church, in addition to having kind of surprisingly become a tool for evangelism. One of the valuable things that, again, a lot of this we kind of learn after the fact is how valuable this has become to missionaries. You just don't take a lot of resources with you when you're going to fly to different parts of the world. My brother-in-law, Jill, my wife's brother, went to Honduras earlier this year. And he preaches in Rogersville, Alabama, and they had made this trip to Honduras. And he was meeting with a number of Christians there, and he was all excited. He said, I'm gonna tell them about the Christian Courier, because there are places they don't have access to maybe a number of resources, and missionaries themselves, again, are not carrying a lot of material or paper. That's very hard to do. So one day he was visiting with them, and he says, hey, I want to share a resource with you that you can get online, and you can find Bible studies and articles that you might find helpful. So he told them about it, and they said, oh yeah, we know about that. We know all about that. And here he was in Honduras, and these people were already using this. So it's helping the church in a lot of different places because of the way the content is delivered, the way that information is delivered for all of us in all kinds of ways. So elders and preachers, Bible class teachers, grandparents, what does this have to do with anything? Grandparents worry about their grandkids, and a lot of times they send them something on the phone. Hey, I found this, you might like this. You know how we get concerned about our loved ones. And so this becomes a means of sharing things, of conversation starters. We've just been so blessed to see the many different ways that one tool is put to use. It's kind of like our version of the old Swiss Army knife. It's like it has a lot of tools you can pull out and use. And so whether it's someone finding the gospel for the first time, whether it's someone who is a Christian engaging in Bible study, whether it's someone saying, you know, I have a friend, we were just talking about this topic at work. I don't have to type all this out, I just send them a link. And it's being used like that in so many different ways. So in our last minute or two, let me just mention something about the future. These are hopes and dreams. These are by no means things that we can implement overnight. But just as a little bit of perspective, there are 3 of us that work in the office at ChristianCourier.com. So my brother is the IT guy, in addition to many other things. Another gentleman has been with us 20 years by the name of David Boggs, and he does all of the accounting, all of the orders, proofreading, all of that kind of stuff. And I'm involved in generating new Bible studies and content. But that's it, just us 3. But we know how many more people could be reached if this was in Spanish. That's something we've considered. We've looked into the matter of geolocation. Well, what does that mean? That means that if someone in a certain place is typing in, who are the 144,000, that it identifies where they're at and helps them more directly say, now here's a church in your area. Because it knows who they are and knows where they are, right? And so can we leverage that to almost help them with that step based on where they are? That's, Jared tells me, complicated, and so he doesn't explain to me how we might be able to achieve that. But it just seems like something that we can think about. New resources, we've purchased some used printing presses. And so for the first time, we're going to be able to do in-house printing of resources, which will bring our cost down to pennies on the dollar. So we can experiment with little booklets and things and see with small runs if there's something that people start gravitating towards. That's something we're excited about. And also there is the matter of what's called Google Trends. And this is completely new for us. However long maybe it's been around, it's a new thing for us. And that is this. We can now generate content. So let me back up. We have content. We have articles. Here they are, and people are asking questions. Hopefully one of those will satisfy their need. Now, we can get reports about what people are asking. For example, where I live in the state of Tennessee, one of the most common questions with the word Bible is this: what does the Bible say about suicide? Can you imagine that is one of the top 3 questions that people are asking? And I'll emphasize to you that most people, and maybe this is surprising or not, most people who are coming to ChristianCourier.com are under 35. That's exciting. 40% in terms of an age bracket are young people. Equally divided between men and women. But the point is, we can research what people are asking and generate content. Maybe we don't have something on that. We can generate content of what is being asked right now in this area. So we're excited about that. About adapting and evolving to do this basic thing. Nothing has changed. We're just trying to spread the gospel. We're trying to say, where are people going? Where are people meeting? What would Paul do if he were with us today? He'd say, where are the people? And this is where a lot of people gather to look for answers. And I want to thank you for being involved. I thank God for all of the Christian people around the world in conversations and and in every day are showing Jesus in their life through acts of kindness and compassion and doing what they can to be a light in this world. We're thankful for you, for your support in our effort. And I hope this has been helpful to you to think about what we're involved in. If you have questions, I'd love to talk to you throughout the afternoon. But thank you so much for being here today and a part of our class.